All right, welcome back to Mark Holbit's vlog, everyone. Hey, today we're going to take out the old 911 and basically talk about, in fact, why you don't necessarily need to spend that 350 grand to get the latest and greatest Porsche to actually enjoy the driving experience. I want to kind of talk a little bit about what this car is and then explain why, in fact, that this is actually a pretty good purchase in today's modern modern marketplace. If you're into a fun car, I want to give you the kind of the rundown, a little bit more detail on what this generation of Porsche 911 is and how in fact cheap you can actually find these. Now there's always, of course, a caveat, and there's the word to the wise, but we always live for today with a little bit of tomorrow. Save your dollars for tomorrow, but not all of it. Let's enjoy a little bit of today, and we really want to talk about life is too short, in fact, to drive boring cars. And so that's really what we're going to boil down to today. But I want to share what we actually bought here. I know I featured in a previous video that we bought this 911. And remember, you can flip up the classifieds. You can go on the Porsche Canada site or Porsche USA site and find out how expensive these cars are brand new. But the reality is you don't have to spend all that hard-earned dollars to get 90% of the same fun. Like, I look at this car. So today, this 911 that we bought is a 2001 Porsche 911. It's a Carrera 2, so it's two-wheel drive cabriolet. This has the early generation. It's an 01. So if you bought something a little newer, if you stepped into the 03 and newer, you'd find yourself in a 3.6 liter, which stepped you up about 20-25 horsepower. But for all intents and purposes, you don't really need to go there. I mean, you spend a lot more money. Every time you make that incremental jump in the Porsche world, you're going to spend a lot more money. Now, the diehards and the true Porsche enthusiasts, and I'd consider myself one because I've owned Porsches for many years, I would say that, yeah, there's probably arguably better Porsches you can buy, 100%. And I would say, for the most part, Porsche is one of those types of brands you can honestly say that the newer is the better. It's really not just about having the latest and greatest. It's not like buying an iPhone where the newest isn't always the best. I mean, for those who own the iPhone 14 Pro Max, like I do, you're finding out that actually it wasn't as good as maybe predecessors in a lot of ways. Yeah, there's some feature upgrades, but reliability, the way it operates maybe isn't quite as good as maybe a generation or two before. And I could say that for Porsches as well. And I kind of want to talk about this one here. So we bought yourselves a 2001. This is a Porsche 911 01, and it has a 3.4 liter flat six engine. It makes about 300 horse. We've got a 6-speed manual gearbox here, right down here, which makes it fun. You can roll your own gears. You can also get an automatic if you don't want to roll your own gears. The Tiptronic, I took a Tiptronic, and I always thought the Tiptronic is junk, and yeah, you don't want that because it's an automatic, it's a torque converter. But actually, when you drive them, they're better than you think. Like I said, if we're being honest and I'm having the same choice between the two, I'm going stick every time. A lot of it has to do with the raw driving experience, but a lot of it too also has to do with resale. And if you buy yourself an automatic, you're going to have to sell it for less money down the road. You're probably going to get a little bit less engagement out of the driving experience, but I will say it was better than I actually imagined. I took out recently a Tiptronic equipped Porsche Boxster, and it was actually pressing the little buttons up here was actually how you activated the shifting. And I gotta say, it shifted very quick. It actually felt very similar to the F-Type in terms of that automatic, ZF8 speed that we talk about so highly of. Well, the Porsche 911 actually had, the Boxster actually had a very similar experience. It was actually quite quick shifting. It was kind of fun. And if we're being honest, if it weren't for the resale and it weren't for, the fact that the enthusiasts say no true Porsche enthusiast will ever drive an automatic, if it weren't for all of those, those perceptions, it actually would be a consideration. So, but anyway, you can get this in an auto, you can get it in a manual. We got the 6-speed manual gearbox here. It's a delight to drive. The throws are relatively short. much improved from older generations. From anybody who's driven the older 911s, the air-cooled cars from back in the day, can really appreciate how long the throws were on those old air-cooled 911s. And then you step into one of these more modern-day Porsches, and you'll find it's much more graceful. Shorter throws, it's hydraulic, it's very, you know, it's notchy but not too aggressive. It's a nice shift. It's basically a nice gearbox. Clutches are light. It's an easy car to drive. For those also in the older 911s, you'll notice the pedals were inset because of to make room for the front wheel arches. So you were always turned at a little bit of an angle, but in this car, it feels very contemporary. It feels modern, and because it is modern, Porsche decided to make a big jump. And when they built this 996, it's the first time that Porsche introduced, for the street, liquid cooling into their flat six engines. And they've been doing that ever since, in the 997, then the 991s, 992s. They've got that liquid cooling because it helps with emissions, more efficient, better cooling. You can run more power out of a smaller displacement. It took Porsche from where they were almost at the thermal limits to a place now where they can actually thrive in today's marketplace and be competitive. So here we are. We're driving around in this thing. It's a literal delight. You still get that throaty flat six engine. People complain that it was a little quiet. I don't think it's that bad. Actually, it's pretty. You still get that throaty sound when you kind of get on the throttle a little bit. So you're not really feeling like you're missing out on a whole lot. You are, if you listen here. I'll give you a little rev here just for your own. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? So there we go. So let's just get on the gas here a little bit. And see, it doesn't sound bad at all. And it's a delightful car. Shifts nice, shifts easy. 300 ponies means it's a very easy car to drive. Lots of pep, lots of get up and go. And yes, remember, if you're gonna wait and save all your pennies to get into that $350,000 Turbo S, it's gonna be worth every moment because the latest Porsches are just spectacular. But realize this these older generations are more analog, less digital, they're more raw. I mean, it's harder to find a manual gearbox in modern day 911s these days. And honestly, if you're gonna wait around to save all your pennies, you're potentially missing the boat. Remember, you gotta get into a place where you're enjoying every moment. And this is why we picked up a car like this. There's no point in saving all our pennies and going hard and go on all in and getting something that is like the next best thing, especially when we want to take the car on lots of big trips and not worried about eating food in it, and really, you know, enjoying it to the fullest. I want to be able to use this car and not worry about a few marks and dings. I want to use this car and not worry about, you know, somebody wearing their shoes in there or drag a little bit of mud into the car. Again, I've said this before, life is too short to drive boring cars. So here is an example of driving a fun car that was very expensive. This back in the day when this car was new, it was about $130,000 Canadian. Today, I've seen all over the internet. I've seen on the Trader, you can get into one of these cars, this generation with reasonable miles. I'm talking 60, 70, 80,000 miles. I will say reasonable as long as you've got good service history in it. You can get into one of these for you know, anywhere from 25, 30, 35, maybe 40 grand if you get something with super low Ks on it and extremely well maintained and a nice specification. So you can get yourself some really, really nice cars, and you can do it for relatively cheap. You know, you can make a decision here. You can go out and buy yourself a brand new Toyota Camry, which clearly is a responsible choice. And if you need a reliable daily driver, I mean, that's what you buy. That's what you need, right? If you need to drive the car all year round, you need to haul people around, you want to worry about smaller, much lower running costs, yeah, you buy a car like that. But if you're in a place where, you know, I have some flexibility in my life and I just want to enjoy the driving experience, for similar money as an entry-level Camry, you can get into one of these. And honestly, for the buck, there's really nothing like it. Again, then from here, you can step into the 997s, which are very similar. They share what they call the M96 engine. And so here's the conversation that I want to have, because it's not for the faint of heart. So I want to share this piece because I've been driving Porsches for many years, and I also know that there's issues that come with virtually every model and every generation. There's always an Achilles with every generation of 911. I don't know why, I don't know what, but everyone seems to have something. So in this generation where Porsche went from that flat six, split case, air-cooled engine on the outgoing model of the 993, and they stepped into this 996 generation, they have now a car with the engine called the M96, which is an integrated dry sump engine. It's not quite as good, glorious, or robust as some of the split case, true dedicated dry sump engines where you'll find it, say a GT3 or the turbos carry the dry sump engines. These actually have an integrated dry sump, more of similar what you'll find in the older M5s, or it's not all in. So even Porsche actually voided warranty for people that would take these on the track because they said too much grip, especially if you put race tires on it. Too much grip meant too much oil starvation, meant you could potentially blow your engine on the track. So it's good for the odd light track day, but if you're truly tracking these cars, maybe opt up for a GT3 or a turbo. But the M97 that's in these had more issues than just that integrated dry sump issue. What they also had was they had the single row bearing. I mean, everybody's talked about the infamous IMS, or intermediate shaft bearing problems. And that kind of existed basically from the get-go, from 97 in the Boxster, 99 in the 911, and it kind of carried through, right through, not just into 996 like with this car, but it carried through up into the 997. And until you got into about 2006, they improved things. It was still the similar design, but it was a little bit more robust. So any generational 911s with the M96 has a risk because of the design of that intermediate shaft. And basically, if that bearing goes, it can let out all kinds of shrapnel, debris in the engine. Usually, often means the engine's toast, means it's junk. It's a brick at that point. So you want to make sure that the upgrade's been done, because there's a couple of upgrades available for the M96 in terms of intermediate shaft. They can put an upgraded, like a ceramic type ball bearing, ceramic type bearing, or there's another system where they have oil fed, where you actually have oil lines feed through the bearing system, and it's sealed, and then it feeds it through and in and out. That ensures a constant feed of oil through the bearing system. Or, I mean, there's a few different options. And this car here actually came with that. And so if you're shopping for a 996 like this, you have to ask the question, do you have the intermediate shaft bearing addressed? And if so, what does that look like? And you have to see the bill. Because to do a IMS bearing upgrade, pretty much pulling an engine gearbox, and you're probably going to do a rear main seal at that time, because that's another issue with some of these cars. And if they blow a rear main seal, that means a lot of puke and oil all over the place. So then what you want to do is, if you're going to go through the IMS bearing, you do the rear main seal, and you're probably going to want to do a clutch at that point, because you're in there. So if you're in there doing all that maintenance and servicing, you might as well count $6,000-7,000 Canadian market to get all that work done. So it's not that it can't be fixed. It just means that A, has it been done? And B, if not, then you want to incorporate that in the negotiations. And then you have yourself a real winning car that you can get in for very cheap. Because, let's face it, the 996 that I'm driving in, the car that we bought, isn't one of the most beloved models. Now, some people, the real diehard 996 fans, love them to death. And they'll argue and they'll say, well, the headlights were more like the GT1 race car. And in some regards, because of that, it makes them more unique. And, you know, that's kind of cool. That's, I mean, an interesting thought process. For me, I don't think that I'd use that as a selling feature, but it is an interesting debate. And, you know, for people, like I said, a lot of the enthusiasts didn't really love the headlight design on these cars, because there's more of that kidney shape style. And so people looking on the used market now seem to be like skipping the 996 and going all the way up to the 997. And what that's doing now, if you've been watching the market, the 997 marketplace has been going nuts. To get into like an early 05 Carrera two-wheel drive coupe with reasonable miles now, you're actually in a place where you're probably going to spend, honestly, 60 grand Canadian right now. It's bizarre because literally, I would say 3-4 years ago, that same car, you could find them for about $35,000. They've almost doubled for the same car with decent Ks on it, good, maintenance service history. Again, keeping in mind, the early generation 997s had the same IMS bearing issues, and you're not out of the woods with that one either. All you're getting with the 997 is you get the revised headlights, which are more round and they're more in line with kind of some of the older generation 911s, and then of course with the newer stuff. So if you were to park a 997 next to a 997, park it next to a 991, you'll find it's actually very tough to distinguish the difference. And as a result, a lot of people said, you know what, I like the 997s because it feels like the true 911. That's a good debate. I mean, I can appreciate that, and I mean, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're looking for. I will never kind of knock and critique the 997s because I think they probably are the sweet spot. They're of the older generation. They're still analog enough. They're still cool enough, and they look like a modern day 911. The revised headlights. They also then incorporated some more distinctive flares, and that's the other thing a lot of enthusiasts didn't love about that, was although it flared out, and if you looked at the car from behind, it still had that distinctive 911 profile, but it didn't have as much exaggerated profiling as, say, the later cars. So if you park, say for example, put yourself let me scale that back. There's one exception: the turbo in the 997 or the Carrera 4S. You get into the C4S in the 996, it actually came with a pretty flared out set of haunches. Actually, it duplicated the turbo's look, other than the intake and the vents on the inside, the flares at that rear flares. It was very much the same as the turbo, so it had the wider, more pronounced flares on the bodywork. But on the 997s, the reality is you got a little bit more pronounced flares, and it became a little bit more exaggerated. And so the styling perspective, it was a little bit cleaner, I guess you could say. 997s just looked a little better in that regard, and I think that's again why the 997s are doing so well. Now, with all of this said, 997s weren't perfect either. The M96 and some of the earlier generations with the intermediate shaft bearing were a problem. But then you introduced in the 3.8 liter flat six, you get into the S models within the 997s, and all of a sudden you had another little problem that would creep in there, and it was cylinder scoring, and that's a bad deal. If you get cylinder scoring, it wasn't always obvious, and it sometimes came on by surprise, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, you're running a little lower compression in a cylinder and you're not sure why, or you're over fueling and there's things going on and you're maybe a little down on power performance. Then you start looking into it, compression check, then they run a bore score and you're finding that, or running a bore scope, and then you're finding that there's scores in the bore. A lot of it was over fueling, flooding the cylinder, dry cylinders, scraping, and sometimes that would lead to just excessive wear in the cylinders. And that's a sad, sad state, because the S is truly a magnificent engine. And from a naturally aspirated perspective, if you weren't going all in GT3 and you didn't want to spend the extra couillons to go with the GTS, because I think the GTS is a little overpriced, if we're being honest, for what you're getting, then the S was the model to go with. But it had the cylinder scoring issue. So it's one of those things that you kind of had to consider and think about. Again, I want to say that any 911, and I said this before, is kind of like pizza, right? Even the worst of pizzas is still pretty good. Even the worst of 911s is still pretty good. The 996 represents a huge, huge benefit. From the driver's wheel, you're getting the same experience, because if you get in the 3.6 liter in the 996, which is, again, I mentioned in 03, puts down 320 ponies, which effectively is within 5 horse of the 997's 3.6, and so the performance is a wash. You know, it comes down then really to the headlights and kind of the styling perspective. So, you know, from where I'm sitting, you could spend 30 grand on one of these, or you could spend 50 to 60,000 on on a 997, and is it worth it? I don't know. That's for you to decide. What I'd suggest is take a good look at both of them, drive them both. You know, the interior, some would argue too, is a little bit cleaner. You know, the 997 has a revised interior. I don't know if it's better, but it's different, and it, you know, some would say it's a little more modern. Some people complain that the interior in the 996s felt a little cheap. I wouldn't necessarily argue with that. It doesn't feel terrible, but it also doesn't feel as upscale as a $130,000 car should feel. So it's not bad, but again, it's, you know, some might consider it a little bit of a mild disappointment. So anyway, at the end of the day, we bought ourselves a 300 horsepower flat six Porsche 911 Cabriolet to get the best of the driving experience. Didn't have to take out a third mortgage to do it. And quite honestly, I'm probably having just as good a fun, if not more, than that guy that just went out and spent that $180,000 on that brand new Carrera S, you know, the 992 generation. Yeah, he's a little quicker in a straight line, absolutely. Yes, he's got some of the latest Bluetooth and plugins. Great, if tech's your deal, that's your storyline. But honestly, when you get down to brass tacks, get down to the art of driving, it's all the same. And you know what? You can get all of the same experience and fun and sound effects from driving one of these as you would in one of those cars. And realistically, honestly, there's nothing else like driving a 911. And so here we go. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, like I said, you can get all of this fun for pennies on the dollar, my friends. And remember, this Toyota Camry, I don't know, you tell me, but at the end of the day, the sun's shining, it's gorgeous out here, I got wind blowing through my hair, life is good, I got the sound of that flat six engine howling behind me here. The hell with all the other bullshit, the hell with that shitty job, whatever. If you want to get out and enjoy some fun and frivolity, I mean, what else can you, I mean, you can't go wrong. It's a Porsche 911, and for this kind of price point, honestly, there's really not much else that beats this. I mean, you could even compare this and say, oh yeah, I can get myself an older S2000 for 240 horse, little 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine, and they're fun, sure, they're good. And it doesn't quite have the same flavor, in my opinion, as getting into a 911. So, good 911 or bad 911? I don't know. You guys decide. What are your thoughts? I'd like to hear your opinion, but I hope I shared enough information for all of you guys out there. If you're thinking about buying yourself an older 911 and you don't have a lot of cash, just know that service history is important. Absolutely. Know that maintenance is always going to be very important, and that these cars are going to be a little pricier to maintain than most other cars on the planet. Absolutely. But if you want to get into a car that gives you some of that fun and you feel good about sitting behind the wheel and pulling gears, I mean, this is it. This is what you're talking about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the section below there, everyone, in the comments. Please drop a line, and above all, please do subscribe. If you haven't yet subscribed, let your friends know. I mean, really, this channel really is about living the life. I don't give a damn about saving an extra 20 grand. At the end of the life, what is $20,000 or $30,000 in your bank account going to really mean? Like, just think about that. That's the way I see this. And you know what? I'm out here enjoying it. I'd rather spend the best part of my life behind the wheel of a fun car than the worst part of my life in bed regretting that I didn't make a more fun, entertaining decision. So, thanks everyone. I hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll catch you all real soon. Bye-bye.